I should have been at a hotel right now, halfway across the country. That was the plan. Emily didn't expect me home until tomorrow. Neither did my kids. But when my flight got canceled, I decided to surprise them. Now, standing in my own living room, I wished I had never come back. Emily sat on the couch, leaning into another man, laughing at something he said. Jason and Lily, our kids, looked up at him like he was the greatest thing in the world. Then Emily turned to them and said something that sent ice through my veins. Guys, this is your real father. And we're going on a trip. The room spun. My heartbeat roared in my ears. Jason and Lily's smiles faded when they saw me standing there. The color drained from Emily's face. The man beside her tensed but didn't move. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of her words crashed down on me like an avalanche. Then I took a step forward, voice like steel. What did you just say? The air in the room thickened, pressing down on my chest like a weight. The words echoed in my mind. This is your real father. And we're going on a trip. I took another step forward. Jason and Lily clung to each other, eyes flicking between me and Emily. The man beside her, Daniel, kept his posture relaxed, but I saw it. His fingers twitched, his jaw clenched. He knew. He knew this wasn't how I was supposed to find out. Emily, though? She just sighed, as if I was nothing more than an inconvenience. You're early, she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. This would have been easier if you weren't. Easier. A bitter laugh escaped me, one I didn't even recognize as my own. Easier? You mean it would have been easier to rip my kids away behind my back? To replace me without me knowing? Emily shrugged. Noah, stop being dramatic. You had to see this coming. Jason's small voice broke through the rising storm. Mom, what do you mean? Dad is our dad. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Emily's face. But it didn't last long. She squared her shoulders and forced a smile. Sweetheart, we'll talk about this later. We have a flight to catch. Flight. The suitcase by the door. The way she was dressed, jeans, sneakers, a travel bag slung over her shoulder. The kids weren't packed yet, but their small backpacks were sitting on the couch. She had planned everything. I clenched my fists. You're not taking my kids anywhere. Daniel finally spoke, his voice smooth, calculated. Look, man. Don't. I cut him off. Don't talk to me like we're equals. His eyes darkened, but he said nothing. Good. Because if he had, I don't know if I would have stopped myself from putting him through the nearest wall. Emily rolled her eyes. Oh, for God's sake, Noah. You always do this. Act like you're some victim when you're the one who was never here. Business trips, late nights at the office. What did you expect? My pulse pounded. I expected my wife to be faithful. She let out a sharp laugh. Faithful? You were married to your job, not me. Do you know how lonely it was, raising 2 kids while you were off providing for us? She spat the word like it was poison. Daniel was there for me. He was there for us. I turned to Jason and Lily. Their little faces were scrunched with confusion, fear. They didn't understand. Not yet. But they would. Go to your rooms, I said, keeping my voice steady. Now. Lily whimpered, clutching Jason's sleeve. But, now. They hesitated, but Jason took Lily's hand and led her away. They shouldn't have to see this. As soon as they were out of sight, I turned back to Emily. So what was your plan? Just disappear? Call me from some airport and tell me my kids weren't coming home. She didn't even blink. I was going to tell you after we landed. The audacity of it all made my vision blur. And what was I supposed to do? Accept it? Move on while my children get raised by him? Daniel finally stepped forward. They deserve better than growing up in a house full of resentment. Emily and I moved before I even realized it. 1 second, he was talking. The next, my fist connected with his jaw, sending him stumbling back into the coffee table. A picture frame crashed to the floor, shattering. Emily screamed, Noah, stop it. Daniel groaned, rubbing his jaw, eyes flashing with rage. You think that changes anything? He spat. She's mine now. Something inside me snapped. I lunged, grabbing him by the collar, yanking him forward until our noses almost touched. You don't get to talk about my wife like that. Emily shoved herself between us, pushing me back. Enough. You're acting like a damn caveman. I pointed a shaking finger at her. You lied to me. To our kids. Do you even care what this is doing to them? She crossed her arms. They'll adjust. They'll adjust. She shrugged. Kids are resilient. And honestly, they'll be happier. I should have done this sooner. I stepped back, staring at her like she was a stranger. Maybe she was. Maybe I never really knew her at all. I took a deep breath, forcing down the rage. I couldn't lose control. Not now. You're not taking them, I said, voice dangerously low. Emily smirked. You think you can stop me? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, barely glancing at the screen before answering. Mr. Carter, a woman's voice asked. Yes. This is Officer Reynolds. We received your report about a potential parental abduction case. We're dispatching officers to your location now. Emily's face twisted. You called the police? I held her gaze, voice steady. You gave me no choice. For the first time that night, she looked afraid. Emily's smirk disappeared the moment she realized I wasn't bluffing. Her fingers curled into fists, her breathing shallow. She opened her mouth, then shut it again, her mind scrambling for a way out. You had no right, she hissed, stepping closer, voice low but sharp. Bringing the police into this? Do you have any idea what you're doing? I didn't blink. I know exactly what I'm doing, stopping you from kidnapping my kids. Daniel scoffed, still rubbing his jaw. You're pathetic, he muttered. Dragging cops into a family matter? You can't accept that she doesn't love you anymore. I turned to him slowly. Oh, I accepted that the second she introduced you as my children's real father. I took a step forward, forcing him to meet my eyes. What I won't accept is you two deciding, on your own, to rip Jason and Lily away from me. Emily let out a humorless laugh. Please, Noah. Like they'd be better off with you. You don't even know them. That stung, more than I wanted to admit. Because deep down, I'd feared it, too. I had spent years working late, taking extra projects, convincing myself that every hour I wasn't home was for them. To give them a better life, a secure future. And now? Now my wife stood in front of me, using my sacrifices as proof that I was nothing. You're unbelievable, I muttered. I worked myself to the bone so you could stay home with them. So they'd have everything they needed. And this is how you repay me. Emily rolled her eyes. Oh, spare me the sob story. You worked for yourself, Noah. You wanted to feel important. Don't pretend it was for us. Before I could respond, headlights cut through the window. A car pulled up outside, followed by another. Blue and red lights flashed against the walls. Emily turned to the window, her face draining of color. You really called them, she whispered. Daniel shot me a glare. You're making a mistake. I ignored him and moved to the door just as two officers approached. One, a tall woman with sharp eyes, held up a hand. Mr. Carter? I nodded. Yes. She glanced past me, spotting Emily and Daniel. And that's your wife? Ex-wife. The words left my mouth before I could stop them, but I didn't regret them. Emily scoffed, but didn't argue. The officer turned back to me. We received your call about a possible parental abduction. Can you confirm whether Mrs. Carter was planning to leave the state with your children without your consent? I exhaled slowly. Yes. I came home early and found her packed and ready to fly out with them. I was never informed, and she made it clear that she had no intention of telling me until she was gone. Emily stepped forward, arms crossed. This is ridiculous. I'm their mother. I don't need his permission to take them on a trip. The officer barely looked at her. Do you have a court order granting you sole custody? Emily's mouth opened, then closed. That's what I thought, the officer said. Unless a custody agreement states otherwise, removing children from their primary residence without the other parent's knowledge can be considered parental abduction. Emily snapped her head toward me. You really want to drag our kids through this? I folded my arms. I want my kids to have a father. Something you were about to take away from them. Daniel stepped up, raising his hands. Okay, let's not escalate this. No one actually left yet, right? No harm done. Can we all just agree this was a misunderstanding? The officer shot him a look. And you are? Daniel Parker. He hesitated, then added, Emily's fiancé. My stomach twisted. Fiancé? The officer nodded slowly, then looked back at Emily. Ma'am, are you confirming that you were intending to relocate with your children and fiancé? Emily hesitated. I was going to discuss it with Noah. I barked a laugh. Yeah, in the airport parking lot, right before you shut your phone off. The second officer, a man with a stocky build, finally spoke. Sir, do you want to press charges? Emily's head snapped toward me. Noah, don't you dare. Jason and Lily peeked from the hallway, their wide eyes darting between the officers and me. My chest ached. This wasn't their fault. They didn't deserve this. I took a slow breath. No, Not yet. Emily let out a breath of relief. But, I continued, eyes locked on hers. I want a court order preventing her from leaving the state with them. And I want full custody. Effective immediately. Emily gasped. Noah, you can't be serious. Daniel clenched his jaw. You're trying to take her kids from her? I turned to the officers. She just tried to take them from me. But I'm the bad guy. The female officer nodded. We can file an emergency motion. You'll need a lawyer. I exhaled. Already have one. Emily shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. So that's it. You're just going to act like I don't matter? I met her gaze, steady and cold. You made that choice when you packed those bags. The officers began talking about next steps, but I barely heard them. Because for the first time that night, I wasn't losing. Emily wasn't calling the shots anymore. She knew it, too. Her mask slipped, just for a second, revealing something behind her anger, fear. And for the first time in years, I felt something I never thought I'd feel again. Control. Emily stood there, frozen. For the first time, she wasn't in control. The realization hit her hard, and I saw it. The flicker of panic in her eyes, the way she shifted her weight from foot to foot as if her mind was scrambling for an escape. She wasn't used to losing. You're making a mistake, Noah, she said, her voice lower now, almost pleading. Think about what you're doing. You're tearing this family apart. I let out a sharp laugh. Oh, now it's me tearing the family apart? Not you, when you decided to lie, cheat, and try to kidnap my kids. Daniel stepped forward again, trying to play the peacemaker. Look, man, I get that you're upset. I snapped toward him. Shut up. My voice was steady, but the rage underneath it burned white hot. You're not part of this. You never were. You're just the guy she used to screw around behind my back. His jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. The female officer cleared her throat. We'll need both parties to provide statements regarding custody. If either of you has legal documentation proving rights over the children, we'll need that as well. I have everything, I said immediately. Birth certificates, proof that I've financially supported them alone for years, even proof that she was planning to leave the state without notifying me. Emily shot me a glare. You were spying on me? You made it easy, I said coldly. If you're going to stab someone in the back, at least learn to cover your tracks. The second officer gestured toward the living room. Let's all sit down. We'll go over everything before making any formal decisions tonight. I stayed where I was. I want him out of my house. Daniel scoffed. You've got to be kidding me. The officer looked at Emily. Does Mr. Parker reside here? Emily hesitated. Too long. No. I answered for her. He doesn't. This is my house, bought with my money. He has no legal right to be here. Daniel's nostrils flared. I don't need a legal right to be here. I was invited by Emily. And now the police are here. I shot back. So your invitation has been revoked. Emily turned to the officers. This is ridiculous. He's my fiancé. He has every right to be here. The female officer raised an eyebrow. Your fiancé? Do you two live together? Emily's lips parted, but no sound came out. She was trapped. The officer turned to Daniel. Sir, unless you're on the lease or have proof of residence, we'll have to ask you to leave for the night. This is an ongoing domestic dispute, and your presence is escalating tensions. Daniel's fists clenched, but he saw the warning in her expression. With a bitter exhale, he grabbed his coat. This isn't over, he muttered under his breath as he brushed past me. I didn't react. I had already won this round. But the war was far from over. We sat in the living room, the air thick with tension. The officers started gathering information, my proof of income, messages between Emily and Daniel discussing their secret plans, and even a few witness statements from neighbors who had seen them sneaking around. Emily sat across from me, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Every time I spoke, she rolled her eyes, huffed, or scoffed under her breath. The officers noticed. Mrs. Carter, the female officer said finally, looking at her with an almost amused expression. You don't seem very remorseful about this situation. Emily let out a sharp laugh. Why should I be? This is a joke. Noah is overreacting because he can't handle the fact that I moved on. I leaned forward. Moving on is one thing, Emily. Lying, cheating, and trying to erase me from my kids' lives is another. She gave me a sickly sweet smile. You were already erased, honey. You just didn't notice. The officers exchanged glances. The male officer cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, given the circumstances, I strongly recommend filing an emergency motion for custody first thing in the morning. Until then, we advise both parents to remain in the home but refrain from further altercations. I let out a slow breath. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was a start. Emily smirked, clearly thinking she had won something. She had no idea. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the past few weeks, the signs I ignored, the gut feeling I shoved aside, the woman I thought I knew turning into a stranger before my eyes. By morning, I had made my decision. No more waiting. No more playing nice. Emily had thrown the first punch. Now it was my turn. At exactly 8 a.m., I walked into my lawyer's office. "Mr. Carter," she said, standing to shake my hand. "Rough night." "You could say that," I muttered, handing over a folder. "I have everything. Messages, financial records, proof of infidelity, even a police report from last night." Her eyes widened slightly as she flipped through the papers. "This is a lot. Enough to win full custody?" She exhaled. "It'll be a fight, but this puts you in a strong position. And if we prove she was planning to abduct the kids, that could shift things in your favor fast." I leaned forward. "I don't care how messy it gets. I want her out. I want my kids to know who their real father is, not some guy who waltzed in and played house while I was working to give them a future." She nodded, scribbling down notes. "Then we move fast. I'll file the emergency custody order today. In the meantime, don't let her provoke you. She's going to lash out." I clenched my jaw. "She already has." My lawyer gave me a knowing look. "Then be ready for worse." By the time I got home, Emily was pacing the kitchen, phone in hand. The moment she saw me, she narrowed her eyes. "What did you do?" I set my keys down calmly. "Good morning to you too." "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "My bank account is frozen, my lawyer says I was served, and Daniel won't answer my calls." "What the hell did you do?" I met her glare with a steady gaze. "I took back my life." Her nostrils flared. "You think this is over? You think you can just take my kids and ruin my life?" I smiled. "Emily, you did that to yourself." Her phone buzzed. She grabbed it, eyes scanning the screen. Whatever she saw made her face go pale. I knew exactly what it was. The beginning of her end. Emily's hands trembled as she stared at her phone. Her usual arrogance vanished in an instant, replaced by something I'd never seen before: fear. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Something wrong?" Her eyes darted to me, then back to her screen. "You had no right," she hissed, her voice shaking with rage. I tilted my head. "No right to what? To protect my kids? To make sure they don't get dragged into your mess?" She clenched her jaw. "You froze my accounts, you filed for custody," and her voice cracked. "You sent those messages to Daniel's wife." I shrugged. "He deserved it." She let out a breathless laugh, but it wasn't amused, it was unhinged. "You're a vindictive bastard." I smiled. "And you're just figuring that out now?" Her phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't even look. Instead, she slammed it onto the counter. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Oh, I have a pretty good idea." Emily's world was crumbling. Daniel was married, something she had conveniently left out. His wife, Lauren, had been in the dark until I sent her everything. Every text, every plan, every lie. The last time I checked, she wasn't taking it well. And Daniel? He had more to lose than Emily. His marriage, his house, his job. Turns out, workplace affairs don't sit well with corporate ethics boards, especially when the affair happens on company property. Emily's hands curled into fists. "Do you really think this makes you the hero?" she spat. "You're just as bad as me." I exhaled slowly, keeping my voice calm. "No, Emily. I was the good guy. I worked, I sacrificed, I gave you everything. And you repaid me by spitting in my face." She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "You made your choices. Now you get to live with them." She scoffed, shaking her head. "You're pathetic. You think the courts will just hand you the kids? Judges don't care about cheating, Noah. They care about stability. And I'm their mother." I stared at her for a long moment. And a damn bad one. Her expression darkened. "Watch it." I pushed off the counter and stepped closer, lowering my voice. "No. You watch it. Because I'm done playing fair. You tried to erase me from my kids' lives. Now it's your turn to feel what that's like." She swallowed hard, but didn't back away. She was stubborn, arrogant. She still thought she had the upper hand. She didn't. Not anymore. An hour later, my lawyer called. "We have a problem," she said, her voice clipped. I frowned. "What kind of problem?" "Emily just filed a counter motion. She's claiming emotional distress and accusing you of being a hostile co-parent. I nearly laughed. You're kidding. Wish I was. A pause. She's also requesting an emergency hearing to limit your access to the kids until a formal custody decision is made. The air left my lungs. She's trying to keep me away from them. Yes, but don't panic. We expected her to fight back. The good news is, you have a stronger case. The police report alone gives us leverage. But this means we have to move fast. The judge will likely set a hearing within the next 48 hours. I ran a hand through my hair. What do we do? Stay calm. Stick to the plan. And most importantly, don't give her a reason to use anything against you. No yelling, no threats, no arguments she can twist in her favor. I exhaled. Easier said than done. That's why I get paid the big bucks. Despite the situation, I smirked. But the moment I hung up, reality set back in. Emily wasn't backing down. She was going for blood. That night, the house was silent. The kids were asleep. I sat in the living room, sipping a whiskey, trying to clear my head. Emily hadn't spoken to me since our last argument. She had locked herself in the bedroom, probably scheming. I was ready for anything. Or so I thought. At around midnight, I heard soft footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting one of the kids. It wasn't. It was Emily. Dressed in nothing but a silk robe, she leaned against the doorway, her eyes calculating. I sighed. What do you want? She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer, her voice dropping into that familiar, honeyed tone. We don't have to do this, you know. I stared at her, unimpressed. Do what? She smiled. Fight like this. She sat beside me, close, too close. Her fingers trailed along my arm. We were good together once. We could be again. I laughed, shaking my head. Unbelievable. She pouted. Come on, Noah. You don't really want to go through a nasty divorce, do you? Think about the kids. Think about us. I pulled away. You're seriously trying to seduce me? After everything. She shrugged, lips curving into a smirk. It worked before. I exhaled sharply. You're desperate. Her eyes flashed. No, I'm practical. You think you're winning right now, but the truth is, divorces are ugly. Custody battles are worse. We could end this right now. No courts, no lawyers. Just us. I stared at her, disgusted. Unreal. Her expression darkened. Fine. She snapped, standing abruptly. You want war? You got it. She stormed off, and I sat there, shaking my head. I had underestimated her. She wasn't just a liar. She was dangerous. And I wasn't done fighting yet. The morning after Emily's pathetic attempt to manipulate me, the house felt different, tense, like a storm was brewing just beneath the surface. She barely looked at me as she moved around the kitchen, sipping her coffee, her posture unnaturally stiff. But I knew her too well. This wasn't guilt. It wasn't regret. It was calculation. She was plotting something. I had spent the night thinking about her sudden change in behavior. She had gone from furious to seductive in the span of a few hours, and now she was eerily calm. That meant only one thing. She thought she had the upper hand again. I just didn't know how yet. Then, right as I was about to leave for work, my phone vibrated. A text from my lawyer. She filed for a restraining order against you. We need to talk, now. I nearly dropped my phone. A restraining order? The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't just trying to win in court. She was trying to destroy me. I turned slowly, looking at her. She was watching me over the rim of her coffee cup, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. She knew I had just found out. Something wrong? She asked, feigning innocence. I clenched my jaw. You really went that far? She sighed, placing her mug down. Noah, you've been so unstable lately. I just don't feel safe. I had never hit her. Never even yelled at her in a way that could be considered threatening. But that didn't matter, did it? A simple accusation was enough to put me in serious trouble. I took a slow breath. This is your plan? Get a fake restraining order so you can keep the kids from me. She tilted her head, eyes gleaming with amusement. Oh, come on. Don't act so surprised. You had your fun trying to ruin me. Now it's my turn. My hands curled into fists. I wanted to say something, anything, but I knew better. Every word, every reaction, could be used against me in court. I grabbed my keys and walked out without another word. I met my lawyer, Lisa, at her office an hour later. She was already flipping through paperwork, her expression tight. It's bad, she said. She's claiming you've been emotionally abusive and that she fears for her safety. There's no actual evidence, But in these cases, judges err on the side of caution. I ran a hand over my face. So what does that mean? Lisa sighed. It means there's a real chance they could temporarily limit your access to your kids while this gets sorted out. If she gets an emergency restraining order, you might not even be allowed in your own house. I felt a surge of panic. She's trying to kick me out of my own home? She's trying to make you look like the problem. If the judge believes her, you could be the one packing your bags while she stays in the house with the kids. I sat back, my mind racing. Emily wasn't fighting fair. She had never fought fair. And now, she was playing the legal system like a damn game. What do we do? I asked. Lisa hesitated. We fight back. Hard. I already filed a counter motion. We're going to challenge everything, but you need to be careful. One wrong move, and she could twist it into proof that she needs protection. I exhaled sharply. This wasn't just about divorce anymore. It was about survival. When I got home later that evening, I found my worst nightmare waiting for me. A police car sat in the driveway. I froze, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. I knew exactly what was happening. Emily had wasted no time. I stepped out, keeping my hands visible. 2 officers stood by the front door, talking to her. She was crying, fake tears streaming down her face, her voice shaking just enough to sound believable. When she noticed me, she flinched dramatically, stepping back like she was terrified. It made me sick. One of the officers turned to me. Sir, we need to speak with you. I nodded. I know why you're here. He exchanged a look with his partner before glancing at Emily. Your wife has filed for a temporary restraining order. Until this is reviewed in court, you are legally required to leave the premises. I clenched my jaw. This is my house. The officer shifted uncomfortably. I understand, sir. But for now, you need to comply with the order. Do you have somewhere else to stay? I could feel her watching me. I refused to look at her. Yeah, I said, voice tight. I'll figure it out. The officer nodded. You have 15 minutes to gather any essentials. 15 minutes. 15 minutes to walk through the house I had built, the house I had paid for, and pick out the few things I could carry. Meanwhile, Emily got to stay. With my kids. And she was smirking. I turned on my heel and walked inside. I grabbed a duffel bag and filled it with whatever I could, clothes, my laptop, a few documents. I moved quickly, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing. This wasn't over. She thought she had won. She had no idea what was coming next. I drove away that night, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Emily had finally pushed too far, and I wasn't going to sit back and let her get away with it. I pulled into a hotel parking lot and sat there in silence. My lawyer had told me to stay calm, to fight this the right way, but Emily didn't play fair, and neither would I. She had spent months lying to me, betraying me, trying to erase me from my own life. And now, she was using the legal system to destroy me completely. No, she wasn't going to win. I pulled out my phone and made a call. It was time to hit her where it hurt. Sitting in that dimly lit hotel room, staring at the ceiling, I felt a kind of rage I'd never known before. It wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet, cold, calculated. Emily thought she had me cornered. She had taken my home, tried to take my kids, and now she wanted to paint me as some kind of monster. She didn't just want a divorce, she wanted to erase me. But she underestimated me. I wasn't going to sit back and let her destroy everything. If she wanted to play dirty, she was about to find out what it felt like to lose. I grabbed my phone and made a call. The next morning, I met Lisa at her office. She had already seen the court papers. This is worse than I thought, she admitted, rubbing her temples. She didn't just file a restraining order. She's also trying to push for full custody of the kids, claiming you're emotionally unstable and unfit to parent. I exhaled slowly. So what do we do? Lisa looked me in the eye. We fight back. Hard. But that means we need proof, real proof, that she's lying. A slow smirk crept onto my face. I have something. She raised an eyebrow. What? I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a video. I had spent months suspecting Emily of cheating. Long before I caught her in the act, I had started gathering evidence. Not because I planned for this, but because something inside me knew she wasn't just going to walk away peacefully. I hit play. On the screen, Emily's voice came through clear as day. I don't care if he finds out. He's too much of a coward to do anything about it. Let him suffer. Lisa's eyes widened. Then, another clip. I'll take the kids, the house, everything. He's just a paycheck to me. Silence filled the room. Lisa leaned back, processing. This changes everything. That afternoon, Lisa filed a motion to dismiss the restraining order, backed by our evidence. But that wasn't enough. Emily needed to feel the same pressure she had put on me. So I did what she least expected. I called CPS. If she wanted to claim I was an unfit father, I was going to make sure they took a good, hard look at her. I told them everything. The affair, the way she emotionally manipulated our kids, the video proof of her saying she was using me for money. I didn't embellish. I didn't lie. I just laid out the truth and let them do the rest. Then, I went a step further. I hired a private investigator. If Emily had no problem lying under oath, I needed something bigger, something that would destroy any credibility she had left. And I knew exactly where to look. 3 days later, everything started falling apart for her. Lisa called me first. The judge saw the video evidence and dismissed her restraining order, she said. But that's not even the best part. Emily is under investigation now. CPS got your report, and they're taking it seriously. I could hear the excitement in her voice. This was huge. Then came the real bombshell. The private investigator called me later that evening. Noah, you're going to want to see this in person. I drove straight to his office. When I got there, he handed me a folder, his expression unreadable. Your wife isn't just cheating on you, he said. She's living a double life. I frowned. What do you mean? He flipped the folder open, revealing pictures. Emily, with a different man, not just the one I had caught her with. Another one, in a different city, at a different house. And in one of the pictures, she was wearing an engagement ring. My stomach dropped. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning to marry someone else while still legally married to me. The investigator looked at me carefully. You ready to burn her world down? I stared at the pictures, my hands tightening into fists. Oh, I was more than ready. The next day, I walked into court with all the evidence. Emily sat across from me, wearing that same smug expression she always had when she thought she was winning. But that confidence started to crack when Lisa placed the recordings and photos on the judge's desk. The moment she saw the pictures of her other fiancé, she went pale. This isn't what it looks like, she stammered, her voice shaking. The judge narrowed his eyes. Then explain. Emily opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Lisa leaned forward. Your Honor, not only has she committed perjury by falsely accusing my client of abuse, but she is also engaged in bigamy, intending to marry another man while still legally wed. Furthermore, her attempt to alienate the children from their father was clearly calculated and malicious. We request full custody for Noah immediately. Emily snapped. You can't do this to me, she shrieked, slamming her hands on the table. You're ruining my life. The judge's face darkened. No, Ms. Carter. You ruined your own life. The verdict came faster than I expected. The judge granted me full custody of the kids. Emily was barred from the house and ordered to pay child support. Her fiancé? The investigator had already sent him the pictures. He left her immediately. Her lover? Turns out, he had no idea she was even married. Emily lost everything. And I walked out of that courtroom free. Standing in my house that night, with my kids asleep in their rooms, I finally let myself breathe. Emily had spent years lying, manipulating, using people like chess pieces. She thought she was invincible, but in the end, karma caught up to her. And I didn't even have to lift a finger. She destroyed herself. Now, I was free to build a life without her. And for the first time in years, I felt peace. The night was quieter than it had been in years. No tension buzzing in the air, no weight pressing down on my chest. Just silence, the kind that didn't feel suffocating. The kids were asleep in their rooms, their breathing steady, peaceful. I stood by the window, staring out into the night, the glow of streetlights flickering across the pavement. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't trapped in my own life. Emily was gone. It still didn't feel real. The courtroom scene replayed in my mind over and over again. The way her face twisted in shock when the judge read the verdict. The sheer panic in her voice when she realized she had lost everything. That moment, watching her unravel, should have felt like a victory. Maybe, in some ways, it was. But all I really felt was emptiness. Not because I missed her, God, no. That part of my life was dead and buried. But there was something hollow about seeing the woman I once loved turned into a stranger. Or maybe she had always been a stranger, and I had just been too blind to see it. I thought about how it all began. The slow unraveling of our marriage. The late nights, the fake smiles, the whispered phone calls she thought I didn't hear. The way she made me feel like I was crazy for suspecting anything, like I was the problem. And yet, in the end, the truth had come crashing down so violently that there was no escaping it. She had tried to take everything from me, my home, my children, my dignity. But in her greed, she had only destroyed herself. I had won. So why didn't it feel like it? I poured myself a drink, the ice clinking softly against the glass. The burn of whiskey slid down my throat, grounding me. It wasn't about the alcohol. I didn't need it to numb anything. It was just a quiet moment, a pause in the storm that had consumed my life for so long. My phone buzzed on the table. "Lisa, how does it feel?" her message read. I stared at the screen for a moment before typing back. Like I can breathe again. And it was true. The weight was gone. The chains were broken. Emily could no longer control me, manipulate me, twist my reality to fit her selfish narrative. But there was still one last thing left to do. The next morning, I met Emily one final time. Not by choice. She had demanded to see me. We met in a cold, impersonal cafe downtown, the kind where no one paid attention to anyone else. She sat across from me, her eyes still red, her expression a mixture of desperation and bitterness. "You ruined my life," she spat, her fingers tightening around the coffee cup in front of her. I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "No, Emily, you ruined your life." I just let the truth speak for itself. Her jaw clenched, and for a moment, I saw the old Emily, the one who used to know how to control me with just a few carefully placed words. "I can fix this," she said suddenly, her voice dropping into that soft, pleading tone she used whenever she wanted something. "We don't have to do this. The kids, they need both of us. We can figure something out." I almost laughed. The sheer audacity of it. After everything she had done, she still thought she could manipulate her way out of this. "You didn't care about the kids when you were lying to them," I said, my voice sharp. "You didn't care about them when you were trying to erase me from their lives. So don't sit here and act like you suddenly give a damn now that you've lost." Her face twisted in anger, but she had no comeback. She knew I was right. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Then, she scoffed, shaking her head. "You always thought you were better than me," she muttered, bitterness dripping from every word. I stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, I leaned forward. "No, Emily," I said quietly. "I just never thought you'd be this pathetic." I stood up, tossing a few bills on the table, and walked out. That was the last time I ever saw her. Life moved forward, as it always does. The divorce was finalized, and the house was legally mine. Emily tried to fight for visitation rights, but the court saw through her act. The judge ruled that she could see the kids, supervised, and only if they wanted to. They didn't. She called them a few times in the beginning, left voicemails full of fake tears and empty promises. But kids are smarter than we give them credit for. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. They knew who had been there for them and who hadn't. Eventually, she stopped calling. The last I heard, she had moved to another city, bouncing from one failed relationship to another, still searching for someone to take care of her. But that was no longer my problem. I was finally free. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. I rebuilt my life, piece by piece. I reconnected with old friends, started taking the kids on trips, made memories that weren't tainted by lies and betrayal. The scars Emily left were still there, but they no longer defined me. I had walked through the fire, and I had come out stronger. One night, as I tucked my daughter into bed, she looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes. "Dad?" she asked softly. "Yeah. Are you happy now?" I smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Yeah, sweetheart," I whispered. "I really am." And for the first time in years, it wasn't a lie.